All right, so we are going to continue to read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Today, our goal is to be focusing on unknown words. And the way we do that is by using context clues. Context clues are the clues that are written around the word. So that means it's the sentences above and the sentences below that can help me to understand what an unknown word means. Every day when we read, we come across words that we do not know. But in order to get a better understanding of the sentence, I have to figure out what exactly that word means. So as we read today and you read on your own, you're going to find words that you do not know. Your job is to then use context clues to figure out what those words mean. So I'm going to start off with chapter 2, Mr. Willy Wonka's Factory, reading pages 8 and 9, and then going over the two questions. Chapter 2, Mr. Willy Wonka's Factory. In the evening, after he had finished his supper of watery cabbage soup, Charlie always went into the room of his four grandparents to listen to their stories and then afterwards to say good night. Every one of these old people was over 90. They were as shriveled as prunes and as bony as skeletons, and throughout the day, until Charlie made his appearance, they laid huddled in their bed, one bed, two at either end, with nightcaps on to keep their heads warm, dozing the time away with nothing to do. But as soon as they heard the door opening and heard Charlie's voice saying, "Good evening, Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine and Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina," then all four of them would suddenly sit up and their old wrinkled faces would light up with smiles of pleasure and the talking would begin. For they loved this little boy. He was the only bright thing in their lives, and his evening visits were something that they looked forward to all day long. Often Charlie's mother and father would come in as well and stand by the door, listening to the stories that the old people told. And thus, for perhaps half an hour every night, the room would become a happy place, and the whole family would forget that it was hungry and poor. One evening, when Charlie went in to see his grandparents, he said to them, "Is it really true that Wonka's chocolate factory is the biggest in the world?" "True!" cried all four of them at once. "Of course it's true. Good heavens! Didn't you know that? It's about 50 times as big as any other. And is Mr. Willy Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world?" "My dear boy," said Grandpa Joe, raising himself a little higher on his pillow, "Mr. Willy Wonka is the most amazing, the most fantastic, the most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. I thought everybody knew that." "I knew he was famous, Grandpa Joe, and I knew he was very clever." "Clever!" cried the old man. "Oh, he's more than that. He's a magician with chocolate. He can make anything he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears?" The other three old people nodded their heads slowly up and down and said, "Absolutely true, just as true as can be." And Grandpa Joe said, "You mean to say I've never told you about Mr. Willy Wonka and his factory?" "Never," answered Charlie. "Good heavens above, I don't know what's the matter with me." "Will you tell me now, Grandpa Joe, please?" "I certainly will. Sit back, sit down beside me on the bed now and listen very carefully." Grandpa Joe was the oldest of the four grandparents. He was 96 and a half, and that is just about as old as anyone can be. Like like all extraordinarily old people, he was delicate and weak, and throughout the day he spoke very little. So we'll stop there and scroll back to the beginning of our chapter and then look at our questions. Question number 1. Which phrase from the text supports that Willy Wonka is clever. So I know all of my answer choices are coming from the text, but I need to know which phrase, which group of sentences are going to support the fact that Mr. Wonka is clever. So I want to go back into the text where it talks about Mr. Wonka being clever. So today I'm going to use a pen to underline within the text. So it says, and um, is Mr. Wonka really the cleverest chocolate maker in the world? And so they go on, my dear boy, yes. So I would track and tag this as number one. So, my dear boy, yes, he is the most cleverest. Well, what exactly makes him clever, right? So, as we go on, they give us even more to say about him. Let's see if I don't know how to delete that. All right. So, it says that he is the most amazing, the most fantastic, the most extraordinary chocolate maker the world has ever seen. Okay, so let's look at our answer choices to see if any of those go there. It says A, his tiredness fell away from him. So we aren't talking about the old grandparents and how tired they are. We're talking about Mr. Willy Wonka and what shows him as being clever, a very smart man. And so being tired doesn't go along with that. Next one is B. He is a magician with chocolate. So that was one of the things that they said. I went too far. A little bit further down. Clever, cried the old man. He's more than that. So he's more than just being smart. It says that he is a magician with the chocolate. So we can mark that as possibly being a good answer choice. He's amazing. He can make anything that he wants. Isn't that a fact, my dears? All right, so C, he was famous. So yes, he's famous, but that doesn't make him quite clever. It just means that a whole bunch of people know about him. And then my last answer choice is it's about 50 times as big as any other. So that's describing his chocolate factory, but that doesn't really describe him as being smart. Him being able to do all these things should be able to show that he is a clever man. All right. So our second question, what effect does Charlie have on his grandparents? So we're going to scroll back up to where Charlie is coming in to speak with his grandparents. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. All right. So here it says that, in the evenings after he had finished his supper of watery soup, Charlie is coming in to see his grandparents. All of his grandparents were very old. They were shriveled up. They were bony. But when Charlie made his appearance, so right here, we're starting on actually being able to answer that question. Charlie is making his appearance. Charlie is coming into the room. They laid huddled in one of their beds, two at either end with their nightcaps on. Before then, they were dozing. So they were sleeping the day away. But as soon as they heard the door opening and heard that voice of Charlie, what's happening to them? They're starting to be different. It says all four of them would suddenly sit up. So before they were laying down, dozing off, falling asleep, but as soon as they heard Charlie, they all suddenly sat up, and then their wrinkled faces lit up with smiles of pleasure. And then the talking would begin. As they go on, it says that for about half an hour every night, so instead of dozing off trying to go to sleep, they would sit up and talk for about a half an hour every night. It was something that everyone was looking forward to. So here we want to see, well, Charlie comes into the room. How does that affect his grandparents? A, they become very angry at the thought of Charlie. No, right here we said that their faces light up with smiles. There is no anger. B, they seem to grow regretful when he spoke to them. Regretful would show that they don't want him around and that they are upset with him being there. And they're not upset. We talked again about the pleasure smiles on their faces. C, they became more tired when he was around. He had the opposite effect on his grandparents. He said the talking would begin for about a half an hour. They look forward to that moment in their day all day long. And then that last answer choice was D. They seemed to grow quite young when he was around. So their wrinkled faces would light up. They would now have energy they didn't have before. That's really my best answer choice. They have now become quite young now that Charlie is around. Your job is to now begin reading on page 10 all through chapter 2 and 3. So now at the end, you should have read chapter 2 and 3 before you finish answering the questions. And you're going to start right here on page 10. All right.